Hello, and welcome to another installment of There You Go with Bryan. He was born September 16th, 1927 in Bronx, New York. He would go on to become one of the most successful actors of the 1970s, playing the much-beloved Lieutenant Columbo in the NBC series of the same name from 1968 to 2003. He won 4 Primetime Emmy Awards and a Golden Globe Award. In 2013, he even received a posthumous star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He was Peter Falk. While he would go on to be known around the world, success didn't come easy for this son of Michael and Madeline Falk. His father owned a dry goods store and his mother was an accountant. His parents came to America by way of Poland and Russia. Tragedy struck early for young Peter when at the tender age of 3, he was diagnosed with retinoblastoma, a cancerous tumor found in the right eye. In many ways, this would go on to inform much of his life after he was told that he would need to have an operation to remove his right eye. The operation was a success. He was fitted with a glass eye that he would wear for the rest of his life. However, he adapted well and was not slowed down by the surgery, but the loss of his eye left him with a trademark squint that would go on to give him a quizzical and intense appearance. While in school, nothing slowed him down. He went on to play sports just like thousands of other young men. Basketball and baseball were his favorites. It was sometime around the age of 12 he was attending summer camp in upstate New York when he volunteered to participate in a production of The Pirates of Penzance. He discovered he enjoyed acting, and one of his camp counselors, Ross Martin, who would go on to star in The Wild Wild West, said that the young man showed promise. After graduating from Ossining High School in Westchester County, New York in 1945, Falk briefly attended Hamilton College in Clinton, New York. But by his own admission, he found college to be boring. As World War II was still going on, Falk, young and hungry for adventure, decided to try to enlist in the United States Army, but he was turned down because of his missing right eye. He next tried to enlist in the United States Merchant Marines, and they accepted him. He spent a year on a ship working in the kitchen. Being in the Merchant Marines proved to not be the adventure he was seeking. So he came back home after reading in the newspaper about a war breaking out between Israel and Egypt. Peter, now barely 20, got the idea to enlist with the Israeli army. He was given a date to report for active duty, but on the date he reached the boat, the war ended. If young Peter Falk was looking for adventure, he would have to keep looking. He went for a semester to the University of Wisconsin and then transferred to the New School for Social Research in New York City, where he earned a bachelor's degree in literature and political science. Still seeking something exciting to do in his life, Falk traveled to Europe, and he worked on the railroad in Yugoslavia for 6 months. He still had no clear goal for his life, so he came back home to America and enrolled in Syracuse University. He earned a Master's of Public Administration's degree at the Maxwell School of Syracuse University in 1953. At the time, the United States government was encouraging young people to become civil servants. Falk later said that he had no real desire to do public administration, and he said he wasn't even very good at it. Looking at a bulletin board at his school one day, he saw a flyer asking for people to volunteer for the newly formed CIA. Peter applied for the job, but was rejected because of his membership in the Kitchen Workers Union when he was in the Merchant Marines. This was the beginning of the McCarthy-era witch hunts in America, and anything that smelled of communism was considered to be suspect. Again, Peter would have to seek excitement somewhere else. He was offered a job utilizing his college degree as a management analyst with the Connecticut State Budget Bureau in Hartford. It was a boring job, but the pay was steady, and it allowed him to indulge his free time by joining a small theater group in Hartford, Connecticut. He seemed to enjoy getting back in touch with the same feeling of excitement and artistic expression that he felt when he was a kid at summer camp. Falk, now hungry to learn the craft of acting, heard of a very good teacher by the name of Eva Legelian, who was giving acting classes at the prestigious White Barn Theater in Westport, Connecticut. The only problem was that the class was for professional actors only, something that Peter was not. Nevertheless, he would drive to Westport, Connecticut every Wednesday night after getting off of work and sneak into the class. One night while running late and trying to sneak into the class, his teacher caught him and asked him in front of all the other students why he was sneaking in. He told her he arrived late because he was driving from Hartford. She replied, "I don't know of any professional acting that takes place in Hartford. How do you make a living?" He told her, "I'm not a professional actor, but I'd like to be." She gave him a stern look, but allowed him to stay in the class. After attending classes for 6 months, Peter was able to get a letter of recommendation from his teacher to the William Morris Agency in New York City. That was all he needed. He went back to Hartford, quit his job at the budget office, packed a bag, and moved to Greenwich Village to pursue an acting career. He went on to play bit parts in several stage productions and even made it onto Broadway. At the same time, he continued to audition for television and film, but didn't have a whole lot of luck. He managed to get a screen test at Columbia Pictures for studio boss Harry Cohen, but during the screen test, Cohen told Falk, "For the same price, I can get an actor who has 2 eyes." It was at this point that Peter was advised by his agent that while he could make a meager living as an actor, he should never expect to be a star. He was advised that the loss of his eye would always be a burden on his career. By 1960, Falk did get one big break. It was in a gangster film called Murder, Inc. He played a character named Abe Rulis, who terrorized New York City in the 1930s. While the film itself was dismissed, the New York Times film critic Bosley Crowther singled out Peter's performance. "Mr. Falk is mesmerizing with his uneasiness. He appears to be looking at people out the side of his eye. His performance is strangely captivating, and when he explodes in a fit of murderous rage, you can't look away." This would prove to be Peter Falk's breakout role. He even made a sequel, and he was nominated for an Academy Award as Best Supporting Actor. This was followed up in 1961 with the last film made by famed director Frank Capra. The movie was pocket full of miracles. Falk was able to repeat his success from the previous year, and he was nominated for his second Oscar. For the rest of the 1960s, Peter Falk would enjoy success as a professional actor, but for the most part, he was always cast in supporting roles. He played a cab driver in the 1963 comedy It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, and he revisited playing the role of a gangster in Robin and the Seven Hoods with Frank Sinatra in 1964, and a wacky sidekick to Jack Lemmon in the 1965 film The Great Race. It was about the same time that Falk started showing up on television, most notably as a Fidel Castro-type dictator of a South American country who is overwhelmed by paranoia and sees assassins all around him in an episode of The Twilight Zone. He also appeared as a gangster afraid of dying in Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Around the same time, you could find Peter Falk popping up in episodes of Have Gun Will Travel, Studio One, Kraft Television Theater, New York Confidential, and Naked City, not to mention The Untouchables. While he wasn't becoming a major star, he was definitely developing a reputation around Hollywood for being a very likable and talented actor. All he needed now was one big break. And that big break came in the spring of 1968. The character of Lieutenant Columbo was created by William Link and Richard Levinson. The character of Columbo was apparently inspired by Dostoevsky's dogged police inspector Porfiry Petrovich in the novel Crime and Punishment. It was a mystery cop show with a twist. Rather than a whodunit, the show typically revealed the murderer from the beginning, then showed how the Los Angeles homicide detective went about solving the crime. Much of the character of Columbo was created by Falk himself. Much like his character, Falk always considered himself a bit of a disheveled and absent-minded person. He was quoted once as saying, "I'm always losing and misplacing things in real life, only now I get paid for it." But Falk was also very methodical, curious, and was known for being a perfectionist. All these things came together to create the character of Lieutenant Columbo. It should be noted that Peter Falk was not the studio's original choice to play the crumpled, cigar-chewing police detective. The series was originally written as a vehicle for the world-famous crooner Bing Crosby. But when being faced with the prospect of working long hours on a series that could possibly run for years, Crosby took a pass and the role of a lifetime went to Peter Falk. The pilot went on the air and was an immediate hit. As soon as he was through with all of his previous commitments, he was signed to play the role of Columbo, a role that he would inhabit for the next 35 years. The first episode of Columbo, the series, was directed in 1971 by then 24-year-old new director Steven Spielberg. After working with Spielberg for 1 week, Peter Falk went to the network and told them, "This kid, the director, he's way too good to be working in television." From 1971 to 1978, Columbo aired regularly on NBC as part of the umbrella series NBC Mystery Movie. In 1989, the show returned on ABC in the form of a less frequent series of TV movies still starring Falk, airing until 2003. Falk won 4 Emmy Awards for this role as Columbo, and the show ended up being so successful in its run that the creator, William Link, wrote a series of short stories published as the Columbo Collection, which included drawings by Falk of himself as Columbo. Lieutenant Columbo owned a basset hound named Dog. Originally, the dog was not going to appear in the show because Peter Falk believed that the show already had enough gimmicks. But once the two met, Falk felt that the dog was exactly the type of dog that Columbo would own. So, from that show on, the dog would regularly appear. And the iconic raincoat that Lieutenant Columbo wore in every episode? Well, it made its first appearance in a program called Prescription Murder. That was a raincoat owned and purchased by Peter Falk right around the time that he started the series. He was walking in New York, stopped on 57th Street because it was raining, ducked into a department store, and bought a raincoat. He liked it so much it made him feel so comfortable that he started wearing it when the show started filming. Falk felt that the raincoat would add to his character's idiosyncrasies. If he could be fumbling through his pockets for a piece of evidence and discover a grocery list, asking to borrow a pencil, becoming distracted by something irrelevant in the room at a dramatic point in the conversation with a suspect, he felt it created tension. He inserted these moments into his performance as a way to keep his fellow actors off balance. He felt that it helped the scene to make the other actors confused and impatient. And as for his famous catchphrase, just one more thing. Well, that was conceived when he and William Link were writing an episode of the show. We had the scene that was too short, and we already had Columbo make his exit. And we were too lazy to retype the scene, so we had him come back in and say, just one more thing. It was never planned. As far as Columbo's theme song, it was an old children's song entitled This Old Man. It was introduced into the series in 1973, and Columbo can be heard humming the song from time to time or whistling it. Peter Falk won 4 Emmy Awards for his portrayal of Lieutenant Columbo in 1970, 1975, 1976, and again in 1990. And in case you were wondering how much money Falk was making from the series, when it started he was making $75,000 per episode. 5 years later, his pay shot up to $300,000 per episode. And by the time the series made a comeback in the 1990s, the young man who was told his glass eye would prevent him from ever being a major success in the world of acting was making an incredible $600,000 per episode. Undoubtedly, Peter Falk will always be remembered for playing the part of Lieutenant Columbo, one of the most successful shows in television history. We shouldn't forget, though, that he also appeared in many great films at the same time that he was working on his series. Director William Friedkin hired Falk in 1978 to play in The Brink's Job. He also appeared as an ex-CIA officer of questionable sanity in the comedy The In-Laws. And as he transitioned into the later part of his career, he appeared in The Princess Bride, Murder by Death, Maid, and he had a chance to show off his comedic side in 1981 in The Great Muppet Caper. He appeared in the German-language film Wings of Desire in 1993. By the late 1990s, he returned to the New York stage to great reviews in David Mamet's Glengarry Glen Ross. As he entered the last decade of his life, Peter Falk spent more and more time pursuing one of his first loves, art. Most people didn't know, but Peter Falk was an accomplished artist. He worked primarily in charcoal and pencil. In 2006, an exhibition of his drawings appeared at the Butler Institute of American Art. He had been drawing and painting his entire life. He also took classes for years at the Art Students League of New York. He also loved to play chess and enjoyed watching professional tennis. As his career was winding down, Falk decided he wanted to make the last films of his career to be something his grandchildren could enjoy. He decided to make a wonderful trilogy of holiday films, including A Town Without Christmas in 2001, Finding John Christmas in 2003, and When Angels Come to Town 2004. As for his personal life, Falk married Alice Mayo, who he met when the two were students at Syracuse University back in 1960. They adopted two daughters, Jackie and Catherine, who would ironically go on to become, of all things, a private investigator. Although Falk and his wife divorced in 1976, the following year, he married an actress named Shira Denisa, who he met on the set of Columbo. She would go on to appear in more episodes of the series than any other actor outside of Peter himself. Theirs was a highly passionate and volatile relationship that would go on for over 30 years. In December of 2008, it was reported that Falk had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. By June 2009, he had rapidly slipped into dementia after a series of dental operations where the anesthesia had greatly affected his cognitive ability. Peter Michael Falk passed away on the evening of June 23, 2011. He died at his home on Roxbury Drive in Beverly Hills, California, at the age of 83. His death was brought on by pneumonia with complications from Alzheimer's. He's buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles, California. Oh, and just one more thing. For many years, there was much debate about Lieutenant Columbo's first name. The first name was never mentioned in the series, but in one episode, the lieutenant had to show his driver's license, and if you zoom in very close, you can just about make it out. Frank Columbo. Peter Falk may have moved on, but Lieutenant Frank Columbo will always be on the job. Thank you so much for joining me for There You Go with Bryan. If you'd like to support this channel, please click the Venmo or Patreon link below. We always appreciate you tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time on There You Go with Bryan.
Holy Jamo.